Welcome back to our Springtime in Winona series of oil pastel drawings, and today we will be doing a tulip, which feel free to use your own set of colors. This is just going to be some suggestions, and hopefully everybody's will look a little bit different, and it'll be just kind of like going out into the garden and seeing a whole variety of tulips. I picked the tulip first of all because it's a fairly easy leaf shape and flower shape, and it's a pretty recognizable shape. And second of all, it's kind of that iconic spring flower. It just adds so much color to the world that says here it's spring and the summer is coming. So I'm just going to start out today by drawing in some shapes that'll help me see where I want to put my tulip. And I'm going to use the light gray today, just because I want to kind of get some lines in there, but I don't want it to be too dark. So the basic tulip stem, I guess, is kind of just a long stem, might get a little bit wider down at the bottom than it is at the top, but I can adjust that all a little bit later. So then I'm going to take a leaf, and a tulip leaf is kind of long and it's a little curly, might have a lip there, might kind of go out and around, might twist itself around down here somewhere. So we're just going to get those basic shapes on the paper first, and we can adjust them a little bit later. I always like to put another one on the other side. This one is also going to have a little folded over spot like that. And then the shape of the tulip is kind of like we'll put kind of like a teardrop shape here, but it'll have a rounded top. And then maybe kind of a petal out on both sides. And some of them have an extra petal on the back, which you can't see quite as well. So I think that'll be a good place to start with our tulip. And a lot of times on this type of picture, I like to start with a background, but I want my background to really accent the color of the flower or the leaves. So I think I'm going to wait until we get a little bit more of an idea of what we want for color. Tulips come in so many colors. I can't just pick one. So I am going to start with all my greens, and I have a full 24-piece set. So I have a couple of extra greens that some of you might not have, but I'm also going to add my yellows into that mix. And I think I'm going to start with some of my darker tones. When I look at a picture like this, I like to first of all see where the shadows are, where the darkest spots are, and where the lightest spots are. And then I like to just kind of do layers of the colors in between. So let's say where this folded over, it's going to be dark there. It's going to be dark kind of right underneath it. There'll be a line. Oops, I forgot a line in here. I think I'm going to put a line there. We'll start with that. Maybe kind of come around the corner a little bit here, and probably down at the very bottom. Then on the other piece, I think there's going to be a little bit of a shadow where this is folded over, and a little bit underneath it too, but I'm going to leave a little bit of space there for now. Just something like that. I'm just going to put a really little bit of it on the stem here on one side of the stem, and we're going to pretend like the light is hitting our stem more on the other side of it. So some of our lighter colors might be in here. And you'll notice that I'm just really lightly, I'm not even worried about blending yet. I'm just getting some color down on the paper. And the nice thing about pastels is we can build it up, kind of change those layers a little bit as we go. And you'll probably notice pretty quickly that my gray lines from my outline will just kind of blend in with all of the rest of the colors in my leaf. Now let's add some brighter tones. I think the light's going to be really hitting underneath here. We'll blend this out a little bit. And I might add some just little streaks of yellow in different places, but I think this one is closest to the light and it's going to have the most yellow in it. So we'll start with that. I think I'm also going to do just a little bit of the lightest pale orange I have. I could use white as well, but I'm going to put some light along the bottom edge of the stem. And I might actually eventually go in and put a little blue in there, because sometimes the stem it's light colored and it's not a super bright green. It's kind of a dull bluish green. So I'll put a layer of white in there, keep it really nice and light through there. Now let's go ahead and put a little layer of blue on there. You can see already just a couple of layers of color, and it's kind of starting to blend in there a little bit. The blue works really nice with your darker spots where you're going to have a shadow as well. You can blend a little bit of blue in with your greens. And blue often is one of the best ways to make a shadow with green, and same as back and forth works the other way too. Green is a really great way to make a shadow in a blue color. I want my leaves to stay a fairly bright green, so I'm just going to start going over now and putting in some of those overlapping spaces that we've talked about in other videos and classes that we've done. And I'm going to probably mix in some of this. It's the darker green in the 12-piece set. It's kind of just your basic green. I'm going to start putting some layers of that in. Then do the same thing on the other one. And you'll notice everything looks kind of streaked and not just a flat color, and that's a good thing. We want to show some shadows in here. I might actually even put just a little strip of black under here where that leaf folded over and had a shadow underneath it. Let's see, same thing here. That helps me remember where my shadows are. And then I can just kind of keep taking those colors back over the top of each other and adding layers, and it'll start to blend a little bit better. Could do a little bit of white right along the edge, right above the shadow. And I can go back and kind of blend in my shadow a little bit more. Now I'm probably going to have pretty dark spot here because this leaf is a little bit behind the stem. So there might be just a bit of a shadow from the stem. I think I'll even put a little black along there. Then I'll go back to adding some more blending layers. You'll notice that once you put black on there, it's pretty hard to cover it up. So all of my dark colors, I'm going to be pretty careful about that when I'm putting them down. Now I can start really just kind of coloring it green, but all those colors that I had underneath as a base color are going to give me a bunch of different shades of green, which is pretty realistic actually, especially when you're looking at flowers. There's so many colors in them. I'm going to see if I can get in a little closer to that black and blend it out just a little bit. It's almost like I'm getting a hold of the black and pulling it down into the rest of the paint. Smearing it around a little bit. I got some lines in here from my darker color that I kind of want to disguise. I don't want to put that much texture in it right away. So I'm going to go back over with a very light touch and add a thin layer of some of these other colors. It's getting a little bright too. I think I'm going to take, this is kind of a grayish green. I'm going to go over some of the areas with that and just tone it down a little bit. Sometimes we call that desaturating the colors. It's still has a greenish tone, but it's not as bright as some of the yellow greens that we've used already. Okay, then I'm just going to go and pretty much do the same thing on this other leaf. I'm going to start adding different colors that kind of overlap. And I've left a light strip kind of along the top edge of this leaf and put the shadow underneath. So I'm going to try to keep that pretty light colored. In fact, I might actually go over it with some white now. And I'm using a little bit more pressure with the white because I'm kind of using it to blend these colors together. While you're doing your leaf, it might be good to spend a little time kind of just thinking about what color you would like your tulip flower to be. You can look up different ones online, get some ideas of what you might see in the garden. You can certainly do the same thing that I'm doing for your first one and practice a little bit. Then it's kind of fun to get creative and try again. We're starting to get a little bit of a look of a leaf that has a little bit of twist and turn to it. I'm going to go back over my shadow areas and make that not quite so harsh of a line. So lots and lots of overlapping will give you that. So I'm coming in here with, this is my super dark green that's in the 24 piece set. Some of you might have that. And I can use that to kind of get a gradient from the darkest green and the black to a lighter green to an even lighter green. All right, so that one's looking better. The nice thing about leaves is you can always go back over them a little bit later, do some more blending. But I don't need to spend too much time on that right now because we can always come in later and we kind of need to check and see how the rest of it goes to see if it's all the colors we want. Okay, where's my dark green one? Here it is. I'm going to do this one first next to that black line. I'll try to blend out the black maybe before I even add too many layers of the other colors. You'll see I'm leaving a little strip of a really light color in there. That'll be the edge that the light catches. It's kind of the closest to the light source. So it gets the most light on it. All right. I'm thinking in my tulip that I might go, I'm kind of thinking I'm liking some yellow and pink type colors in there. I'll have to play with that a little bit. I've seen, I kind of like my personal favorite of tulips is kind of a peachy coral color that goes kind of blends from a yellowish tone to a pale orange. Not sure how to even describe the color. All right, going back over with my greenish gray to kind of widen out and soften those shadows in there. That one's getting a little bit more smooth. Now I'm not worried too much about the outside edges of these leaves yet, because when we go in and start putting the background in, it's going to be really hard to define those lines perfectly well and not ever overlap them. So I'm not going to worry about them to start with. And I will clean up the edges later as I go. You know, I still think that could use a little bit more of a bluish tinge to it. If you look really closely, sometimes even at pictures, but even sometimes in nature, you'll see when you look at something that you think is green, you might see little bits of blue in it, little bits of yellow, all kinds of different things. So when we add those many, many different colors to our paintings and our drawings, things actually seem to look more realistic when they're done. So light blue was a nice color to do a little bit of blending with on the leaves. Okay, so I think I'm going to have a little bit of the lightest spot of my flower might be down here in the bottom. So what I'm going to do is, which will be hard to see in the camera, I'm just going to put a layer of white down, maybe up here too, on the top of that leaf. Might be one of the spots the light is hitting it. So I'm just going to put a base of white down, which will help me keep it light colored even if I go over it with another color eventually. And then I'm just going to take, this is a pale orange, I think it is. Yeah, one of the light orange ones. And I'm going to use that kind of as a base color so I can see my design. Right now I'm just kind of getting a layer of color on the paper. And let's see, I think I'm going to go from like a yellowish orange peachy color out to a pink. So let's see what the pink looks like when I catch the edges of that. That one's going to be pretty light pink anyway, but you know, maybe just a little bit down around the edges. I'm just making this up as I go, so if it doesn't look like a real, so to speak, tulip, that's just fine because it's what's in my imagination. And I'd like everybody to kind of be able to have a little bit of fun, kind of make-believe, doing your own colors in here. So feel free to use different sets of colors if you want. If you have a purple in your set, you could do a little bit of purple. And I think this one is going to be a little bit darker along this edge and this edge from the shadows where the light is. So I might just use the purple kind of as the shadow anyway. And I'm sure I'm going to I'll be able to see the bottom of this even though it's a light color. All right, now I'm going to start going back with some different colors. This is out of the 24 piece. It's called Old Rose. It's kind of a soft pink color. So I'm just going to get another layer of pastel crayons on the paper. Then I'm probably going to go back to my original colors. Sometimes the base colors we put down are not really quite the color we want to have our piece end up with. They're more just to help us know where the lights and darks are. And of course you have to be careful because some colors aren't going to blend really well together and you don't want to just end up with a muddy look. So I'm going to go back and forth kind of over the line between the two, and this is kind of like one the gradients that we've been doing in the previous videos, is just overlapping that edge so that it's hard to see where it changes from one to the other. I think I'm actually going to do a little, let's see which color do I want. This is kind of a lighter orange. What's it called? Yellow orange. Give a little bit of that in here. And I think I might do just a tiny bit of kind of like a brown base to the flower. Okay, let's see. Back to pale orange. I'm going to use this kind of as a blender, and I'm going to go back and forth over all those layers that we've put in and see if I can kind of make a nice smooth gradient there. Keeping it fairly light right now. That one ends up blending it without changing the color too much. I think it softens it a little bit, but that's about it. Okay, you know, maybe some of our edges could use a little bit more pizzazz. So I'm going to come in with a little bit of red and just highlight those edges a little bit. And as you can tell, making a really good peachy or watermelon color is probably really hard with this set that we have. But if you enjoy doing pastels, you can get the 50-piece set or a 48-piece set. That's a lot of colors, and there's a lot of variety in the colors, so you get a chance to try blending some different things in. Okay, now I'm going to need to go back and add a few shadows. So let's see, what's the opposite of yellow would be purple. I think maybe I'll go with like a bluish tone in some of the shadows. And sometimes you don't have to use black for your shadows. You can put a brown or a blue or a purple in there. And when you kind of combine those colors, they look dark and they kind of just turn into a shadow. And I'm going to maybe put just a touch of black in there. And let's see, so if I did yellow and purple together, I'm going to get just kind of a dark brownish look. So let me go in with the yellow one and blend it all out. That should become my shadow. There we go. And I think that I want some darker back on that furthest one. You could do the same thing with a green. You could go in and add a little bit of green. And then maybe I want to go back in with my white or my pale pink, my pale orange, and do some blending. No rules on the colors that you can use for your tulip. Tulips are kind of a, there's so many varieties anyway. All right, let's see if I can blend that out just a little bit more. And I think I'm going to use my white on the face of my tulip, this one that's closest, to brighten it all up and blend it all together. Make it look a little bit more smooth. Some tulips have really great designs in them when they're not so subtle. They're just really bold designs. So make sure you look at different pictures of the flowers you're thinking of and get some ideas before you even start working on it. All right, and I knew that this one back here was going to be pretty light, so let's keep that. All right, every once in a while you'll get some loose pieces on your paper. You might need to brush them off. Just do it carefully so it doesn't smear it. All right, now it's hard to see in the camera. I think in real life my tulip color is brighter than what you see in the camera. But I'm going back in here with my brightest yellow to kind of lighten it up and intensify that color a little bit. I could do the same thing in my greens if I wanted to brighten some of them in spots. So your warm colors always tend to make things look like the light is reflecting off of them. So they're good to add where you want light to come out or to appear to be light. There we go. Now, I enjoy doing a really abstract background in flowers, almost like if you had a photo that was just focused on the flower and everything in the background was kind of faded out. So I'm going to actually do some blacks, and I'm going in first with kind of a circular motion. I'm actually going to kind of put some dots in spaces, some little circles. This will look like shadows between, like if there was other leaves in the background or something. And I'm also going to use a pretty dark green. And I'm kind of just scribbling around in areas because right now I want this to be really, really abstract. It's just going to blend out. But I also want to put a few bright colors in there to see like the sun is sifting through and kind of hitting some of those spots in the background. So this is where everybody's will be totally different, all of our colors, and how we could put all the same colors on the paper and they would all look different because it's just kind of a quick get it going, get it out there. And right now I'm not going up too close to my actual flower. Now you could do two things here. This would be really, really pretty if the background was very, very dark. And that's always a little scary to try, but I think I'm going to go back in and do even more blacks. And especially kind of in the corners and around the edges. Sometimes the really dark background will make your flower just kind of pop. I love those photos where there's kind of a black background and the light is hitting that flower. Okay, I also though am going to go back in with my white in a couple of spots and get some good light sections in there. I'm not going to try to get it all. And I can gradually get a little bit closer to the actual flower part of the painting. It's probably kind of safer to get up next to the flower first with something like the white and get a layer down. Which even though it's hard because you can't really see it, you'll be able to tell, you'll be able to feel that there's something on the paper. All right, let's just try this. Pretty dark around the edges of the flower. Not right up next to it, but pretty close. And then, you know what, the grays, my light gray, my grayish green, if you have the grayish green, those would be really good blending colors. We kind of want the background not to be terribly bright. We don't want it to kind of overpower the flower. We just want it to make the flower stand out a little bit more. So I'm going to use more of the dull colors to get those extra layers on and do some blending. Still, this one's pretty light. I can get in a little bit closer to the leaves. And I can start to put a little bit more pressure on it around the edges. Start to get that paper kind of, all the little holes in the paper filled up with pigment from the oil pastels. You can go in really random circles, go harder in some places and less in other places. But right now we're starting to try to fill in our paper. Okay, here's my grayish green. It's a little bit darker, so when I go in closer to the leaf, I'm going to be really careful. You could kind of do this pattern with any colors. You could do all blues and purples in the background, or reds and pinks and oranges, whatever you like. It could be a realistic looking background, or it could be a total imaginary one. It's totally fine. And the fun thing about oil pastels is they are so bright and intense that they really make for a fun design with the really dark or bright, intense colors. Okay, let's see if we can add some more colors in here. I have, this one is a yellow ochre, so it's kind of a pale or subtle yellow. So I think I'm going to take and go over some of those areas where I had yellow in the background already. And I want to tone it down a little bit. So I'm going to go over that area with this. Not have that bright, bright yellow in there. Oh, you know what? I could go in with some browns. That would be a realistic color in the background of an outdoor photo where you have stems and leaves and dried plant material in the background. That would warm it up a little bit more than just a pure black. And you can tell I'm kind of going more around the whole edge of the painting, and this is going to be like kind of like framing it in with a darker color. So you can, as you can tell, my colors kind of change throughout the course of the painting. And it's fun to just try different things. I think I have this really dark blue here. It's a Prussian blue. I think I'm going to go in some of these other dark spaces with the blue. And now you can probably see that there's less and less white spots showing through on my paper. So pretty soon I'll have enough layers. This is a pretty big piece to have to cover it with all of these, to fill the whole thing with pastel pigment. It's a lot of coloring. A lot of times I prefer doing a smaller picture with oil pastels. Oh, let's see. We need to get some more darks down in here. So I'm just going to bring those down a little bit. And at this point, I'm just trying to use as many colors as I can in here. So I'm just kind of going through the colors I have at my desk here and trying to see where I can fill some holes with another unique color. Maybe blend some of the other colors. I think this was the Prussian blue, which is a pretty dark blue as well. Let's see. Keep forgetting to go back into this area between the flower and the leaves. I think I'm going to go with a lighter color to do some blending. Maybe the light blue. It's not quite as intense of a color as the light green, which it's kind of a really, really bright color. You could also use one of the soft pale yellows or the gray, the whites. So at this point, I'm trying to just make the whole background look blurry by blending everything together. And you can see there's spots like down here where I'm getting, the paper is getting pretty well covered, and it'd be really easy to just go in with your finger and blend it around a little bit and just finish filling all those holes. Then it'll totally look like it's a blurry part of a picture. Not quite enough pigment in that section, so I'm going to go back up here. I'm going to be really careful. This finger is pretty covered with a dark color, so I don't want to touch into my flower with that. Get it this way, I can get an idea of where I have enough pigment on the paper, and you know, there might be spots where I just decide I want to leave some white paper showing through. And that's fine too. We're getting it blended a little bit. And you'll notice I've always left a little bit of space that's pretty light colored between the edges of my anything I put in the painting first. And now that I'm getting a lot of good coverage through all of this, I'm going to gradually go in and try to get in a little closer. So if I had decided at the beginning what color I wanted my tulip, I could have done all of this background stuff in and blurred it out, and I could have chosen which colors I wanted in there. I actually prefer to usually do it that way, but sometimes, you know, you just got to try something new, and that's all part of the process, is learning how it works best for you. So something that works really well for me might not work as well for you. You have to be willing to try things and decide what works best. All right, so as I'm going over this with the gray close to the edges of the flower, you can see that it almost has a little bit of a halo effect around the leaves, which is fine because that's the flower is closer to the eye, or the camera, if you want to call your camera took this picture. And so there is going to be more light on the flower than there is in the background. That light kind of reflects off into places sometimes. And this surface is looking pretty good. So pastels and colored pencils are both similar in a way that you don't just put down one color and leave it at that. You try to build up colors in layers and add a lot of colors together. So it ends up not being maybe as realistic as some types of, you know, if you were going to do this with acrylic paint or oil paint or something, you might be able to make it look really, really, really realistic. But it's kind of fun because it's leaves a little bit more room for the imagination. All right, so I am assuming that there's going to be other plants in the background here. So I'm getting some greens in there, using that to kind of blend some of those. If you can't get in there and do the blending with your finger, you can use a blending stub that you would use for drawing with like a charcoal pencil or something, and you can get in a little bit closer. Once you do that, you're going to probably have to clean off the tip of your blending stub, so just so you're aware of that, you'll need to sand it when you're done. But that way a Q-tip would work as well. They're not quite as pointy, obviously. You could probably take the fluffy part, the cottony part, off of your Q-tip and use the Q-tip stick. Would be very similar to the cardboard of my blending stub here. But it works to get a little bit closer in on things. So when you really want to make your drawing pop, seem three-dimensional, you really, really need to pay attention to where the highlights or the lightest parts of the picture are, where the light is maybe hitting it, and where the dark spots are. And really exaggerate those as much as you can. It makes it look more three-dimensional. There we go. That blending stub is working really well for that black line that was so dark in there and hard to blend. All right, we're getting somewhere. One of the other things you can do with this process is you could actually do this on a black paper, and it works pretty well. It's just a little difficult to build up the intensity of your colors if you have black in the background, but especially things like red, if you put a layer of white down first and then go over it with your red, you'll be able to see the red. It won't look pink. It'll actually just really allow it to be red. Okay, I'm going to try I'm using my white here. I'm just going to play with it and see what happens if I lighten the whole background a little bit. And you can tell then if you liked it better when it was really dark, or if you like a little bit more light in there. And if you decide you liked it more dark, you can always go back over it and add another layer of the darker tones. So I just thought, since we are coloring away here, it would be worth the try to see what the difference is. And come back down here a little bit. Okay, now I'm going to definitely need to do some blending. And this will work fine with my finger. See if that brightens up my colors at all, or if it just doesn't look right. I'm thinking I'm liking some of the lighter colors in there, as long as it goes out to the dark colors in the corners. The other thing I should have mentioned is you can do, kind of depends on which direction you color with, you can kind of make a sense of movement, almost like the wind is blowing. So the first time I went more up and down this way, maybe I want to do it a little bit more in a circular motion around it. You won't see the lines, but you can definitely see a bit of a pattern to the direction that you blended everything. Okay. Interesting. I'm not sure that I'm totally done with it yet, but one of the things I was just thinking is oftentimes we can see more sky through in our background, so I might need some lighter blues in there. That'll be spots where it looks pretty bright. So that changed the overall look just a little bit. And I've done mostly cool colors, I guess you could say, in the background. So it's just kind of ending up gray, smudged, but it's not a solid flat gray like if I had just colored the whole thing gray to start with. All right. If you want any really carefully fine lined shadows and stuff, you could come back in with your drawing pencil and mark those lines. I might even do, it's a little bit easier to get a smooth line with the drawing pencil. So I might do some shadows with that. Let's see, this one is overlapping that one, so that one really needs to be more in the shadow. And I can actually blend this out into the background a little bit with my finger as well. Sometimes, however, there's just a little edge of reflected light or a brighter spot right next to your shadow. So I'm going to go in really light touch here along my edges. That'll define it a little bit better. Okay, now let's see, maybe I'll try the dark blue. See if I can get the dark blue up close to that black line. And then I'll be able to blend that out a little bit better into the rest of my background. Sometimes you need to just kind of turn your pastel a little bit to get just the right edge on it. Since they're wide or even wider than a crayon even, it's sometimes hard to find just the right edge for a nice straight sharp line. So sometimes you just kind of have to rotate it in your fingers a little bit. And let's see, what other colors do I want to use to blend this with? So now I can kind of go back in there and make those last lines of color just fade out into the background a little bit. And I could continue this over and over and over with different colors different amounts of the colors. But the fun thing is with pastels is just keep trying it and see what you come up with. I think I need a little bit darker edge in here. And you know what? I think I need some, maybe I'll do purple. Just a little bit of texture right at the top of those petals. Okay, so a little bit more blending. Maybe I'll use my blending stub here. I could work some more with my fingers. I could just keep going back in for a while and trying different layers. But now I've got enough pigment on the paper to really kind of have something to work with. And the rest of it's just going to be fine tuning. One of the things you'll want to do is you could maybe walk away and leave it sit for a little while and then come back and look at it before you take your tape off. That often, sometimes just giving it a few minutes is enough for you to see something you want to change just a little bit. And then sometimes your changes are a little bit easier after you've given it a little bit of a break. Let's see. Last few colors here. I just want to tone this down a little bit. Oh, you know what? I could use some browns in there. That would help soften the whole look a little bit. Keep it dark, but let me blend it out into the surrounding area. Pretty imaginary set of colors here. It's not really a realistic painting, but if you look at it, I think just about anybody's going to recognize that it's a tulip. So let your mind wander and be creative, play with some things, see what you can come up with. The best part is when we share pictures of it with each other. It's so inspiring to see what everybody else comes up with. And maybe we'll be able to share some of these within the community this coming up summer here. All right, kind of a dark looking background. And I think I might spend some time going in now again and just lightening some areas with my white. But now that I've got a pretty good coverage on the paper, I'm not going to do it everywhere. I'm just going to have some lights and some darks that just fade out. And your finger might get kind of tired when you do a lot of blending, and that's pretty normal actually. Kind of like finger painting when we were a kid. It's kind of fun. So have fun with your coloring and your drawing, and also try some different flowers, maybe some birds or other leaves, things that you see around Winona as you are watching spring unfold. And everyone will be beautiful. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing what you create with your oil pastel flowers.